Welcome back to another Deep Dive Explainer. Today, we're taking on the ultimate philosophical test. Now, if you've been following along with us, you know we've used Nāgārjuna's ancient, incredibly rigorous framework to completely deconstruct causality, motion, and perception. But today we're doing something seriously radical. We're turning the microscope right back onto the microscope itself to explore the emptiness of emptiness. I want you to consider this really striking question. What happens when the ultimate philosophical cure actually becomes the final poison? Because we're about to uncover a hidden trapdoor in how we learn and build our worldviews. You see, there's a massive danger of accidentally worshiping our philosophical tools, our concepts of reality, as absolute truths. And when we do that, the very tools that are meant to free us literally end up trapping us. Okay, let's dive into this. To break free from this final conceptual prison, we're going to follow a really structured path today. We'll start with the emptiness of emptiness, identifying the three spheres, hit the tetralemma trap, explore the illusory union, walk the middle way, and finally drop the conceptual raft. So jumping right into section 1, the emptiness of emptiness, let's look at the ultimate diagnostic. It's really essential to view Nāgārjuna not just as some philosopher trying to win a debate, but as a kind of spiritual physician. Up until now, he's been administering this incredibly powerful medicine to cure our desperate grasping at solid objects and absolute realities. But now, it's time for the final dose. We already know the two truths, right? The conventional truth of dependent origination, where things function through causes and conditions, and the ultimate truth of emptiness, meaning nothing has a fixed, independent essence. Well, today, we are turning that Madhyamaka logic right onto the logic itself to entirely deconstruct this framework. We're applying our reasoning to the two truths themselves. Moving to section 2, identifying the three spheres, we need to map out our conceptual landscape. And this brilliantly illustrates our first step. To analyze any interaction in Nāgārjuna's framework, we have to break it down into a triad, or three spheres. First up, we've got opposite 1, dependent origination. Then we have opposite 2, emptiness. And right smack in the middle, we have the relation between them, whether that's their union or opposition. We're basically treating the two truths exactly like an actor and an object. Which brings us to section 3, the tetralemma trap. It's time to test these relationships. All right, here's where we enter the logical demolition phase for step 2. We subject these three spheres to our ultimate diagnostic tool, the tetralemma. Let's ask, can these two truths be identical? Well, no, because if emptiness and functionality were the exact same thing, the conventional world completely collapses and the whole concept of liberation becomes totally redundant. Okay, are they inherently different? No way. If they were totally separate, dependently arisen phenomena couldn't be empty, which means the universe would just be frozen with permanent inherent existence. Obviously, they can't be both, because that's just a flat-out logical contradiction. And they can't be neither either, because that throws us straight into absolute nihilism and total absurdity. So for step 3, we have to face facts. Because every single extreme position linking these two truths leads straight to contradiction, we are forced into a really profound conclusion. The two truths and their relation are themselves completely ungraspable. They're entirely empty of inherent existence, and they are never, ever absolute. Think about that. Even emptiness is just a concept, entirely empty itself. It's absolutely not some cosmic soup or a firm foundation that you can just stand on. Let's move to section 4, the illusory union. How does this function without a core? For step 4, we face a bit of a paradox. If the two truths are entirely empty of inherent existence, how do they actually function together without completely falling apart? Well, when we compare dependent origination and emptiness side by side, we see they don't destroy each other. Because they lack inherent existence, we conclude that these three spheres are completely inseparable. They are dependently co-originated, interdependent, and co-defined. The very concepts of dependent origination and emptiness are co-imputed by the mind. They're just mere designations, conventional tools we use to understand reality, not fixed realities themselves. Now, what's really fascinating here for step 5 is that this reveals the ultimate recursive loop. This is the union of the two truths about the two truths themselves. Phenomena are empty precisely because they are dependently co-arisen, and they can dependently co-arise only because they're empty of a fixed essence. Even the two truths, dependent origination and emptiness, are themselves dependently co-arisen and empty. One truth perfectly supports, implies, and energizes the other, without either one ever being an absolute truth. Which brings us to step 6. We really need to recognize what these truths actually are in practice. Since they're dependently arisen and empty, the two truths and their relation are exactly like illusions, literally like reflections in a mirror, mirages, dreams, or echoes. They are functionally there, yet not there. They're just philosophical mirages, projected by the mind, used entirely to cure our desperate grasping at a solid reality. And here is step 7, the ultimate conceptual gut punch. When we apply the generalized tetralemma to our entire framework, we have to affirm that the two truths and their union cannot be boxed into any conceptual or dualistic categories whatsoever. They are not this, they are not non-this, they are not both, and they're not neither, for whatever this happens to be. It's wild, but you simply cannot pin reality down with language. All right, Section 5, Walking the Middle Way. Let's talk about liberating practice. You might be wondering, how do we actually live with this mind-bending realization? If we can't pin anything down, how do we operate in the world? Well, for step 9, having exhausted every logical extreme, we conclude that the absolute best attitude toward these truths is the middle way. It's a path totally free from all extremes. Dependent origination and emptiness are just complementary antidotes. They cure naive realism on one side and nihilism or solipsism on the other. But in the middle way, there's absolutely nothing to actively accept or reject in absolute terms. So, the crucial point for step 10 is this. We must use these concepts conventionally, but never ever in absolute terms. On one hand, we engage in acting without acting, using the truths conventionally without attachment, fully knowing their true, empty nature. On the other hand, we completely avoid absolute use, which only leads to reification, effort, and basically creating a rigid new religion out of it. We just use the philosophies solely as medicine. Finally, Section 6, Dropping the Conceptual Raft. It's time to break free. If we are truly acting without acting, and we've realized the emptiness of our own philosophical tools, there is only one thing left to do to break completely free. I absolutely love this famous metaphor from the sources. You use the raft of logic to cross the turbulent river of confusion, but once you reach the shore, you do not carry the heavy wooden raft on your back. The framework of the two truths? That was your raft. It got you across the river of your own anxiety and your grasping at solid objects. But once you've crossed, carrying emptiness around as an absolute truth is literally just strapping a heavy piece of wood to your back. You just have to let it go. And for our 11th and final step, when you do let it go, released from the tyrannical hold of all concepts, including the concept of emptiness itself, you might as well perceive everything as primordially equal, pure, perfect, complete, divine, and one. But remember, this is in the strictly non-dual sense of those terms. Not many, not one, not both, and not neither. It's the ultimate liberation of experiencing the suchness of the present moment exactly as it is, right before the mind tries to label it. To wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If even the two truths are dependently co-arisen and empty, if even the cure itself is empty and there is absolutely no inherent ground left to stand on anywhere in the universe, what are you still desperately trying to hold on to? Allow yourself to drop the raft today and just rest in the beautifully fluid flux of reality. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and until next time, stay curious and stay focused.